Ever wondered how an ordinary Aussie turned a small garage idea into a billion-dollar empire? From sleeping in his van to owning one of Australia's most iconic brands, this story proves that the Aussie dream is still alive if you've got the guts to chase it. The dream that started in a garage. Jack Miller wasn't born rich. He grew up in the dusty outskirts of Alice Springs, a place where the summer sun burned the skin and opportunity was as rare as rain. His father drove a truck for a living, hauling cattle across the Northern Territory, and his mother worked at a small bakery. Jack had one dream: to create something of his own. He wasn't sure what, but he knew it had to be Australian to the bone, something that represented mateship, grit, and pride. At 24, after finishing TAFE and a few odd jobs in pubs and roadhouses, Jack had saved a modest $2,000. Not enough for a business, but enough for a second-hand brewing kit he found on Facebook Marketplace. That old, dented metal contraption would change his life. He started brewing small batches of beer in his garage. Nothing fancy, just a mix of barley, hops, and his secret ingredient, native Australian wattle seed. He called it Outback Brew. At first, it was just for fun. He'd share bottles with mates during Friday barbies. But soon, word spread. His friends started asking for more, even offering to pay. The beer had a smoky, earthy flavor, something uniquely Aussie. The struggle begins. But running a business in the Outback wasn't easy. He needed licenses, equipment, bottles, branding. Everything cost more than he had. He approached several banks in Darwin and Adelaide, but they all said the same thing. Open quote, "You're too young, too risky, and too small." Close quote. So Jack decided to go it alone. He sold his old ute, moved into his van, and used the money to rent a tiny shed on the edge of town. That shed became the first Outback Brew Co. Every morning, he'd wake up before sunrise, brew until late, and deliver cases himself to local pubs. Some laughed at him, others supported him, but Jack didn't stop. Then one day, a small bar in Darwin, the Croc's Tail, decided to give his beer a permanent tap spot. Within weeks, Outback Brew became their best-selling local beer. A viral twist. The real turning point came when a backpacker from Germany uploaded a TikTok video titled, open quote, "The most Aussie beer you'll ever drink," close quote. The clip went viral, 4 million views in 3 days. Suddenly, Jack's inbox was full of orders from around the world: Sydney, Melbourne, Singapore, even Canada. He was overwhelmed but thrilled. With the help of his cousin, he built a small website, started online orders, and shared his brewing story on social media. His honesty, accent, and raw determination connected with people. By the end of that year, Outback Brew Co. sold over 40,000 bottles, all handmade, all from that same shed. But success brings attention, and not always the good kind. When giants tried to crush him, success attracts attention and competition. Within months, Outback Brew Co. wasn't just a local name anymore. It was trending across social media. Influencers called it the most authentic Aussie beer ever made. Bars from Melbourne to Perth started calling Jack for supply. But with every step up came a bigger obstacle. In early 2018, Jack received a letter from one of the biggest beverage corporations in Australia. Let's call them Southern Crown Beverages. The letter looked friendly at first, but the message was cold. Open quote, "We've noticed your product name and logo may resemble our existing brand assets. Cease production immediately or face legal action." Close quote. Jack was stunned. His logo was a kangaroo silhouette with a beer mug, nothing like theirs. But the corporate lawyers didn't care. They just wanted him out of the market. He didn't have the money to fight a lawsuit. He didn't even have a proper lawyer. For days, he sat inside his van, staring at that letter, wondering if this was the end of his dream. But that night, he got a message from his old friend, Emma, a small-town journalist from Alice Springs. She said, open quote, "Jack, don't back down. People love your story. Let's make some noise." Close quote. The power of the people. Emma published an article titled, open quote, "A big corporation versus a bloke from the bush," close quote. Within hours, it went viral. Australians everywhere rallied behind Jack. Hashtags like #SupportOutbackBrew started trending. People began posting videos of themselves drinking his beer, tagging him with captions like "Real Aussie spirit right here." Southern Crown Beverages didn't expect that. Their PR team panicked as social media flooded with criticism. Within a week, the company quietly withdrew the legal notice. Jack had won, not through money, but through mateship. Scaling up. With his name now in the news, investors started calling. One was Sarah Nguyen, a Vietnamese-Australian entrepreneur from Sydney who ran a sustainable packaging business. She saw something special in Jack: the grit, the story, the product. Sarah offered him a deal. She'd help expand Outback Brew Co. nationwide, but only if they kept everything eco-friendly: bottles, labels, logistics. Jack agreed instantly. He wanted his beer to feel good and do good. By late 2019, Outback Brew Co. had opened a proper facility in Adelaide, solar-powered, employing local workers and sourcing ingredients from small Aussie farms. The pandemic storm. Then came 2020. COVID hit, bars closed, tourism stopped, orders dried up overnight. Jack watched his dream crumble again. He had 15 employees, thousands of bottles, and no buyers. He refused to give up. Instead of pubs, he started selling survival packs. 6-packs delivered directly to people's homes with handwritten thank you notes. He also launched online virtual tasting sessions where he'd talk live from his van-turned-studio, sharing stories, cracking jokes, and teaching homebrewing. It was a hit. Thousands joined each week. He wasn't just selling beer anymore. He was selling community. By the end of 2020, Outback Brew Co. recorded its highest ever revenue, all thanks to the digital pivot. Recognition. In 2021, Jack was invited to speak at a business conference in Melbourne. He walked on stage in his jeans, boots, and dusty hat, just as he always did. The audience of CEOs and investors looked surprised. Jack smiled and said, open quote, "I might not have an MBA, but I've got something better: Australian grit. When life gets tough, we don't give up. We grab another stubby and figure it out." Close quote. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. That year, he was featured on ABC News, named one of Forbes Australia's top 30 under 30 entrepreneurs, and his company was valued at over $50 million. But for Jack, success wasn't about money. It was about pride. He still visited the small bakery where his mom worked, still helped his dad fix the old truck, and still hosted Friday Barbies with his mates. Because as he said, open quote, "You can take the bloke out of the Outback, but you can't take the Outback out of the bloke." The global expansion and the heartbreak that nearly ended all. By 2022, Outback Brew Co. wasn't just an Aussie name anymore. It was a global symbol of local pride. Orders came in from Japan, the UK, and even the United States. Australians living abroad called it a taste of home in every sip. Jack traveled overseas for the first time, promoting his beer at international expos in Singapore, London, and LA. He wore his signature Outback hat and brown boots everywhere. Reporters loved him. The Aussie who turned dust into gold, they called him. But behind the smiles and media flashes, something was breaking inside. The price of who once brewed beer in a shed now barely had time to sleep. His girlfriend, Clara, who had supported him since the early garage days, often said, open quote, "Jack, you've built a beer empire, but you're losing yourself in the process." Close quote. He'd laugh it off, saying, open quote, "Just one more year, love. Then I'll slow down." Close quote. But one more year became 2. And then, tragedy struck. The call that changed everything. In March 2023, Jack was in London finalizing a deal with a UK distributor when his phone rang. It was his mum, crying. His father had suffered a heart attack while driving the truck. He didn't make it. The world went quiet for Jack. He flew back to Alice Springs immediately, but it was too late. His dad, the man who taught him hard work, was gone. At the funeral, surrounded by friends and family, Jack realized how much he'd missed. Birthdays, Barbies, moments that never come back. That night, sitting by the campfire in silence, he whispered, open quote, "What's the point of success if you lose the people who made you strong?" Close quote. After returning to Adelaide, Jack's focus faded. He stopped attending meetings, delayed shipments, and ignored media requests. Sales began to drop. Investors got nervous. For the first time, Outback Brew Co. faced real financial danger. Competitors copied his style, influencers moved on, and even loyal pubs reduced orders. Jack was drowning. not in debt, but in guilt and exhaustion. Then came Sarah Nguyen, his partner and investor, who found him sitting in the empty factory one night, staring at the bottling line. She said, open quote, "You don't need to carry the whole country on your shoulders, Jack. Remember why you started. Not for fame, not for money, but for pride." Close quote. Those words hit him hard. The revival. In late 2023, Jack decided to take a step back and rebuild, this time slower and smarter. He launched a new initiative called Brew for the Bush, donating part of every sale to drought relief and rural education in Australia. He traveled across small towns again, meeting farmers, local pubs, and families who supported him from day one. He didn't bring cameras or journalists, just himself. And the magic returned. People felt the authentic Jack Miller again, the bloke from the Outback who believed in mateship and resilience. Within 6 months, Outback Brew Co. bounced back stronger than ever. A viral video of Jack giving free beer to volunteer firefighters during bushfires reignited the brand's spirit online. Shash, a global brand with an Aussie soul. By mid-2024, Outback Brew Co. had become one of Australia's top 10 independent beverage companies. But Jack refused to sell it to global corporations. He said in one interview, open quote, "Some offers are worth millions. But if I sell my brand, I sell my story, and that's not for sale." Close quote. He focused on sustainability, solar energy, recycled cans, zero-waste brewing, and earned the Australian Green Business Award 2024. Jack had rebuilt his empire, not by chasing money, but by returning to his roots. The legacy. At the company's 5th anniversary celebration, Jack raised a bottle of Outback Brew before his team and said, open quote, "We started in a garage, we fought giants, we lost people, but we never lost hope. Because that's what being Aussie means. You fall, you get up, and you keep bloody going." Close quote. The crowd cheered, cameras flashed, but Jack didn't care about the fame. He just looked up at the stars. The same sky he saw years ago when he was brewing in that dusty shed and whispered, open quote, "We did it, Dad." The next generation, turning Outback Brew Co. into a movement. By 2025, Outback Brew Co. wasn't just a company anymore. It had become a symbol of hope. Across Australia, people weren't just buying Jack's beer. They were buying into his story, a story about never giving up, about building something from nothing, about keeping the Aussie spirit alive. But Jack wasn't done yet. He'd been through fire, loss, and victory, and now he wanted to give back. The spark of a new idea. One night, sitting under the southern stars outside his Adelaide facility, Jack said to Sarah, open quote, "You know what this country needs? A place where small Aussie creators can get a fair go, just like I did once." Close quote. That's where the idea for the Outback Hub was born, a program to mentor and fund young entrepreneurs from rural Australia who had big dreams but small wallets. The plan was simple. Every month, Outback Brew Co. would select 5 small-town founders. They'd get $10,000 in seed funding. Jack and his team would train them in business, branding, and storytelling. But it wasn't just about business, it was about belief. Open quote, "No one believed in me when I started," Jack said. "Now it's my turn to believe in others." Close quote. The first batch of Outback Hub participants came from all over. Ruby, a farmer's daughter from Wagga Wagga, making skincare from goat's milk. Tane, an indigenous artist from Darwin creating sustainable fashion. Liam, a surfer from Byron Bay building eco surfboards. They all arrived nervous, unsure, just like Jack had been once. But under his mentorship, something magical happened. They learned how to tell their story, how to pitch, how to market authentically. They shared their fears over Barbie's late-night chats and beers around the same shed where Outback Brew began. Within 6 months, all 5 startups were profitable. 2 even got featured on the project. Jack smiled and said, open quote, "That's what Aussie grit looks like. Not polished, not perfect, but powerful." Close quote. Hash, from brand to brotherhood. Soon, Outback Hub became a national movement. Major brands offered to sponsor, universities partnered up, and even the Australian government praised the initiative. But Jack kept it real. No suits, no scripts, no fake smiles. He still wore his old hat, drove his dusty ute, and showed up personally at every workshop. One viral clip from 2025 showed him handing over a $10,000 check to a young indigenous brewer in Catherine. Jack said, open quote, "You're not just making beer, mate. You're making history." Close quote. The video hit 20 million views in a week. Back to his roots. Despite the fame, Jack still made time for Alice Springs. He rebuilt the local sports ground where he'd played as a kid. He donated to the school library in his dad's name. And every year, on the anniversary of Outback Brew Co., he returned to that same garage, now turned into a small museum, where it all began. He'd walk in, look at the old dented brewing kit, and smile. Open quote, "This tin can started it all," he'd tell visiting kids. "If this can turn into a company, imagine what you can do." Close quote. A message to Australia. In 2025, Jack appeared on 60 Minutes Australia for a special feature called "The Bloke Who Brought the Bush to the World." When the interviewer asked, "What's your secret, Jack?" he replied, open quote, "There's no secret, just three things. Work hard, stay humble, and never forget where you came from. Because the Outback teaches you something business schools never can, how to survive." Close quote. His words hit home with millions. Social media flooded with messages. Open quote, "If Jack can do it, so can we." Close quote. The legacy continues as Outback Brew Co. entered its 7th year. It had over 400 employees, exports to 12 countries, and a new tagline that summed up Jack's life perfectly. Open quote, "Born in the bush, brewed with grit." Close quote. But Jack's proudest moment wasn't the sales or awards. It was standing on stage at the Outback Hub Annual Summit, surrounded by 200 young Aussie founders he'd helped build their dreams. Looking at them, Jack said, open quote, "If one bloke from a garage can make it, imagine what happens when all of us stand together." Close quote. The crowd stood, clapping, cheering, some crying. And in that moment, Jack realized this wasn't his story anymore. It was Australia's. The international chapter, Outback Brew goes global. Background music rises. Didgeridoo fades into slow cinematic drums. By 2026, Outback Brew Co. had become more than just Australia's pride. It had become an international phenomenon. From the beaches of Bondi to the bars of Berlin, people raised a bottle and said, open quote, "Here's to the Aussie spirit." Close quote. Jack's beer had officially launched in 15 countries. Each bottle carried a simple message, open quote, "Brewed with heart from the heart of the Outback." Close quote. But global fame came with global pressure. The cultural clash. The expansion began smoothly until the US market. An American distributor wanted to tweak the branding. They said, open quote, "Jack, mate, the kangaroo logo's cute, but Americans won't get the bush thing. Let's make it sleeker, more corporate." Close quote. Jack frowned, open quote, "The bush is who we are. You change that, you change everything." Close quote. But investors were pushing hard. They promised millions in profit if he agreed. For weeks, Jack wrestled with the choice, sell out and go global, or stay true and risk losing the deal. He flew to the US to see it for himself, visiting bars that sold his beer, watching strangers drink Outback Brew and smile. One night, a young Aussie backpacker in Los Angeles recognized him and said, open quote, "Oi, you're Jack Miller, right? Thanks for bringing a bit of home here." Close quote. That one sentence made his decision clear. He canceled the rebrand deal. Open quote, "If they don't get the Outback, they don't get the beer," he said firmly. Close quote. It was a bold move, and it cost him millions. But it saved his soul. The struggle to stay authentic. Jack returned to Australia to face the board. Some investors called him stubborn, others called him a fool. But the customers? They called him a legend. Social media lit up with support. Keep It Aussie trended across platforms. Fans from around the world posted pictures holding their bottles with captions like, "No fake brands here." Sales rebounded. Not because of advertising, but because of authenticity. Outback Brew wasn't just a drink anymore. It was a statement. The world stage. Later that year, Jack was invited to speak at the World Business Forum in Singapore. He walked onto the grand stage, surrounded by CEOs in suits, while he wore his old denim jacket and boots. He began, open quote, "They told me I needed to look global. I told them, I already am, because the Outback lives in every Aussie heart, no matter where we go." Close quote. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. That clip alone reached 50 million views in 1 week. A twist of fate. Just when things looked unstoppable, tragedy struck again. A massive storm destroyed Outback Brew Co.'s main solar facility in Adelaide. Millions in damages. Production halted. Jack stood in the rain that night, watching the factory lights flicker out, the same feeling he had years ago in that garage. But instead of giving up, he rallied the team. He said, open quote, "We built this once, we'll build it again, and this time stronger." Close quote. Volunteers, fans, even rival brewers came to help rebuild. In just 10 weeks, the factory was back up, greener, cleaner, and faster than ever. Going beyond beer, in 2027, Jack launched a new venture, Outback Spirits, a range of native Australian gins and whiskeys made with bush ingredients like finger lime and lemon myrtle. He also opened the Outback Experience Center in Alice Springs, part brewery, part museum, part school, celebrating Aussie innovation. Tourists came from all over the world to see where it all started. The garage that once held a rusty brewing kit now stood as a monument to Australian perseverance. The award that mattered most in 2028, Jack received the Order of Australia Medal for his contribution to business and rural development. But when he took the stage, he didn't talk about money or markets. He said, open quote, "This medal isn't for me. It's for every young Aussie who's been told they're too small, too remote, too different. Because from the bush to the boardroom, we belong everywhere." Close quote. The hall erupted with applause. Full circle, that night, back home in Alice Springs, Jack sat outside with a bottle of Outback Brew, watching the desert stars. His company was now worth over $300 million, but his feet were still covered in dust. Clara joined him, the same woman who'd believed in him from the start. She asked softly, open quote, "Did you ever imagine this, Jack?" Close quote. He smiled. Open quote. "Not for a second. I just wanted to make a good beer." Close quote. They laughed. The camera pans upward, the sky filled with the Milky Way. The narrator's voice fades in. Open quote. "From a dusty garage to the world stage, Jack Miller proved that success isn't about where you start, it's about how far you're willing to go." Legacy of the Outback, the story that changed Australia. Soft acoustic guitar begins. A slow pan across the red desert at sunrise. Open quote. "Australia's heart beats in its dust, and every grain carries a story of someone who never gave up." Close quote. The legacy lives on by 2030. Outback Brew Co. wasn't just a beverage brand, it was part of Australia's identity. Every pub, festival, and road trip esky had that same brown bottle with the kangaroo logo, unchanged since the day Jack drew it on cardboard with a black marker. School kids wrote essays about him. Universities taught his journey in business courses. And on the wall of the National Museum in Canberra, a single plaque read, open quote, "Jack Miller, the bloke who turned the bush into a brand." Close quote. Passing the torch, Jack had turned 45 and finally decided to slow down. He wasn't tired of work, just ready for something bigger than himself. He called a company meeting, not in a fancy boardroom, but under the gum trees behind the brewery. Hundreds of employees sat on picnic blankets, beers in hand. Jack stood on an old crate, hat tilted back, and said, open quote, "This company's never been about me. It's about every one of you, from the brewers to the truckies to the dreamers. Today, I'm handing the leadership of Outback Brew Co. to the next generation, people who will take it places I can't even imagine." Close quote. The crowd fell silent. Then they stood and clapped until the dust rose like smoke. Sarah Nguyen, now CEO, wiped a tear and said, open quote, "You didn't just build a business, Jack. You built belief." Close quote. The return to the bush. A few weeks later, Jack packed his old ute, the same one he'd slept in years ago, and drove north across the country. No cameras, no press. Just him, the road, and the endless horizon. He stopped at every small town that had ever stocked his beer, shared yarns with farmers, bought rounds for strangers, and at each stop, he left a note behind that simply read, open quote, "Keep building, keep believing, keep M," close quote. The film and the movement. In 2031, a young filmmaker from Perth released a documentary titled Brewed in the Bush. It followed Jack's journey from his first batch to his final drive through the Outback. The film broke records. It wasn't about beer. It was about what it means to be Australian. Schools screened it, communities played it at local halls, and people saw themselves in Jack's struggle. Suddenly, small-town entrepreneurs started popping up everywhere. Brewers, bakers, builders, coders, all calling themselves Outback makers. They didn't copy Jack's brand, they carried his spirit. The final scene, visual. A quiet sunset over Alice Springs. The sound of cicadas fills the air. Jack sits outside his childhood home, now a modest farmhouse surrounded by red earth. Beside him, Clara pours 2 glasses of the original Outback brew. He takes a sip, smiles softly, and says, open quote, "You know, Clara, this beer tastes the same as it did 20 years ago." Close quote. She laughs. Open quote, "That's because you never let anyone change it." Close quote. He looks at the horizon, golden light painting the sky, and replies, open quote, "Some things shouldn't change." Close quote. The camera slowly pulls back, showing the wide, endless desert glowing beneath the evening sun. Open quote, "From a dusty garage to a global stage, Jack Miller proved that greatness doesn't come from money or luck. It comes from grit, mateship, and the belief that even the smallest idea can echo across the world." Close quote. Today, every time an Aussie raises a glass of Outback brew, they're not just drinking beer, they're toasting a dream that refused to die. Close quote. Music swells. Gentle didgeridoo with guitar harmonies. Text on screen. Open quote. "Born in the bush, brewed with grit. The Outback dream lives on."